Good afternoon to you. Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com here with your Hurricane Outlook and Discussion. Sunday now, the 25th day of October. Hard to believe we're still talking about the potential threat of hurricanes and whatnot at the end of October. And I keep saying it, that we saw this coming as far back as April, these big pattern signals out across the Atlantic Basin, the La Nina that set up, all of that kind of gave us the sort of shined a light on it, if you will, that it could be this busy. But until it actually happens, I think it's kind of hard to believe. And even as it's happening, kind of sit here and go, really? This is unbelievable. We have Tropical Storm Zeta now down in the Caribbean, and there's a hurricane watch up for portions of the Yucatan, and we're going to have to deal with this as a feature that comes across and eventually impacts someplace along the Gulf Coast, and then that energy is going to stream up into the southeast United States from there. So here's what we know as of the 2 p.m. intermediate advisory. Zeta stationary over the very warm waters of the western Caribbean Sea. Pressure up a hair from where it was yesterday. It's still not very well organized, which is good so far. That's good news. The longer it takes to organize, hopefully the less intense it can get. But we know how fast things can come together once everything lines up. So a real quick look at the different messages here. Tropical storm conditions expected, of course, for parts of the Yucatan Peninsula starting Monday night through Tuesday. Maybe even hurricane conditions. Western Cuba could have the same thing. Even some lingering impacts over portions of Jamaica and the Caymans for any of those peripheral rain bands that come through. And then eventually, bullet point number 2, through Wednesday, heavy rainfall expected to come in across the central and western Cuba area, as I said, Cayman Islands, Jamaica, etc. And then finally, maybe southern Florida, the Keys, and then through that point, after Wednesday, which is interesting that they say through Wednesday, but Wednesday and beyond, certainly. Wednesday during the day, Wednesday night, maybe early Thursday, we got to figure all that out as we go. Zeta could be at or just below hurricane strength as it approaches the northern Gulf Coast. Now, where that is, we don't know. And as the Hurricane Center puts here, that the impacts could bring, surge, rainfall, and high wind, etc., from Louisiana to the Florida Panhandle. That's about as narrow an area as we have to focus on at the from the get-go here. So we'll look at the track map real quick from the Hurricane Center site. And this is going to be changing. I know it will. We all know it will over time, especially since Zeta has been just kind of meandering around down here. The longer that it sits, different things that happen upstream up here and over the western Atlantic come into play. And when it's not moving, that allows the rest of the pattern to kind of change around it. But the general idea, of course, is a track towards the Yucatan. And, if it goes just over or offshore, probably doesn't make that much of a difference in terms of the long-term health of the storm or would-be hurricane. Clearly, if it moves through the channel, it might be a little bit stronger, but it's not real strong to begin with. And in fact, most of the model guidance shows that the more favorable area where there is intensification is actually in the Gulf of Mexico, which is surprising considering how warm the water is in the Caribbean. It's just a very tricky situation. These late season storms, kind of hard to predict. You never know exactly what's going to happen. I think the threat to the areas where Laura and Delta came in is low. They are not even in the cone of uncertainty. So from Cameron, Holly Beach, even as far west as Sabine Pass, Johnson Bayou, etc., Creole, Vermilion Bay region, Sippermore Point, Abbeville, I don't think this is going to be a hurricane threat for your area, thank goodness. But it could be that it's in southeast Louisiana or all of the Mississippi coast, maybe all the way over towards Panama City. We're going to have to just wait and see. It's a very tricky forecast. It really is, and I'll explain that as we go forward. So checking out the big picture, all kinds of things happening out there. This is the leftover extratropical system. It's still a hurricane, even though it's over much colder water. It's post-tropical, basically. One of my kids having a good day. Did you hear that? It sounded like somebody stepped on a cat. That's one of my kids stretching. We all do that, right? When you stretch and anyway, maybe it didn't come through and I'm just being distracted. There is Epsilon up in the North Atlantic, and that's been quite an interesting system to watch. And then right behind it, you notice we've had these pairs this year. We have Zeta. We had Delta and Gamma. We had Marco and Laura. That's kind of been interesting in the western portions of the basin this year, these couplets that formed kind of one after the other, even a few days apart. Also, in the bigger picture, and I'll address this more tomorrow before I leave for the Gulf Coast, there's more energy out here across the deep tropics that we got to keep an eye on. Not because I think it's going to develop out here, but that it'll end up over in the Western Caribbean or Eastern Caribbean, who knows, as a more favorable upper environment sets up, what we call the Madden-Julian oscillation. It's going to oscillate to more favorable across this area of the world in the coming days, and I'll look at that in closer detail tomorrow. In other words, we are not finished even after Zeta makes landfall this coming midweek along the north central Gulf Coast. No, we probably have one, maybe two, maybe three more overall between now and the end of November that are going to form, and we'll deal with that later, but I'm just telling you, we're going to break the record for amount of named storms, and we're going to continue to add to the ACE, the accumulated cyclone energy, in this historic season. I won't say it's far from over, because that's a stretch, but we definitely have time on the clock, and the hurricane season is going to take advantage of that, so to speak. All right, so this particular animation from weathernerds.org, a couple things to point out. You can see the rotation down here, but it's kind of broad. Maybe the center is closer to where I've drawn, this little doodad here. Intense lightning with some very strong updrafts just to the north of the coast of Honduras down here. And it's interesting that this has drifted more south than we have expected. It's not up here, the center of circulation. It's not over here off the tip of Jamaica. It's not just south of the Caymans. It's kind of tucked away fairly far to the south and west of the Cayman Islands. There's Grand Cayman right there. And this is what I mean. Some of these feeder bands can come through and dump a quick burst of very heavy rain, maybe bring some gusty winds. But the overall circulation is kind of elongated in here. We can see that. And as long as it stays that way, it's not going to intensify very quickly. But it's trying. It's getting there. And I'll explain why it's struggling in just a little bit from a tweet that I will share with you from Eric Webb. The vorticity signature, it's too bad that the tropical storm symbol is on there, because it's nice to be able to show what it looks like. Generally it's rounded, but again, the circulation is not aligned. And what I mean by that, and I've talked about this before, the low-level circulation has to align with the mid and the upper level. Once everything gets all connected and they're not disheveled or separated in any way, then it becomes much more efficient for the thunderstorms to develop, and everything just starts to work better. That's just the way it is with these cyclonic storms on our planet. It's probably the same thing on most other planets in our solar system and elsewhere in the universe. Seriously, it's physics and the way the thermodynamics is to get the latent heat to come out of the clouds, from the condensation. That's a warming process, extracting that warm water from the Caribbean Sea. But everything has to be kind of stacked up. If it's tilted in one direction or another, it doesn't matter. It can be pushed from the north, it can be pushed from the south, from the east or the west or the southwest, any number of directions. If it gets tilted, it's not in alignment by definition, but that also really does mean something structurally. And that leads me to this tweet from our friend Eric Webb, who noted, and I love the annotations that he has put on these graphics, that a mid-level ridge over the western Gulf has imparted some northerly shear, and there you go, that's what I was talking about, over Zeta the past few days, enticing Zeta's low-level vortex to deviate down shear, being pushed, as he says there, i.e. southward, of most track forecasts. This year should abate soon as a trough digs into the Rockies and weakens this ridge. And so if we click on this graphic, and Eric did a great job annotating this, I'll just add a little bit to help bring it out a little bit more. Here's the energy coming in from the Rockies that he speaks of, and that'll eventually sort of erode this ridge away, and that'll do a couple of things. That'll lessen the shear, but without this blocking influence. And here's something very important to understand, and this is where, like, adding to what somebody like Eric has created, this is nice. This area of high pressure that I have outlined there in the black is like a large dome of air, and it's tough and kind of thick, you know what I mean? And the little blue area that you see down there, that's the storm, and it's got less influence. It cannot bully its way into that high pressure area. And so you have another area of high pressure out here, and there's a little bit of a weakness through here, but there's just enough to connect through here that this is just stuck. Zeta is kind of sandwiched in there. So one way to look at this, and I talk about this every once in a while, very large, dense water balloon, another large, dense water balloon, smaller, less dense water balloon. They're all physical. They're all fluid, and that's important. That's not, Zeta is not a piece of wood in the water. Everything's fluid, and so it's just the areas I've outlined in black. Those are like denser, if you will. There's more air piled up there, and the little old Zeta down there representing upward motion and all that rain and everything is just a lighter area overall. And so it's like a less dense water balloon. It can still get pushed on and morphed and shoved, but it's not going to just push one of those high pressure areas out of the way. What will? This trough, this energy coming in, will help to erode this down. It releases some of that pressure, if you will. The pressure is not as much. The heights fall, as we call it, and then Zeta will start moving again in the general direction of the Yucatan. And as it does so, the shear that's coming around this clockwise flow of the high will abate, and then Zeta should start to strengthen. And you can see this as he talks about where the low-level vortex is. Yep, the stronger convection to the south of that, things are not aligned. And so once that shear lets go, Zeta should be able to align itself and start to strengthen and probably reach hurricane strength at some point. It seems probable. All right, so now let's try to look at the models. Oh my goodness. So we're going to look at 3 of them right now in terms of operational, or at least 2 operational and 1 parallel. Sort of the newbie, the new version that'll be coming up, that's the GFS parallel. And then we're going to look at a couple of ensembles, and I'll try to do this quickly here. So this is, everything's 12Z, initialized 12Z today, and everything's at 850 millibars of the atmosphere, or the lower 5,000 feet or so. And we're looking for this right here. That is our water balloon, Zeta, down at the 5,000 foot level. That's what the vorticity signature looks like according to the GFS from 12Z today. Now it is initializing most of that energy fairly far to the north of where it actually is. It's actually a little bit more to the south here. You got to be careful when you say, you know, a lot more or whatever. You're talking in terms of center. It's important. 40, 50, 60 miles makes a big difference, but in a global scale, it's not that big of a deal overall. But for what it's worth, the models are initializing the main bulk of the center of vorticity perhaps a little bit more north and east than where it really is. Does that make a difference? I don't know, because we don't know the future yet. But let's look and see what the GFS does with it, shall we? So we're going out into time, 24 hours out. GFS immediately, within the next 24 hours, strengthens this. And it passes close to the Yucatan, the tip of the Yucatan, and into the Gulf, and finally it makes landfall along the Alabama-Mississippi border area, maybe right across Mobile Bay. Hard to say for sure. And even these being, 6-hour increments, you know, you can get the idea of this curvature. It comes in maybe right across Mobile Bay and then into the deep south. Why does it do this? This cut-off piece of energy in here comes in, kind of scoops Zeta up and off. Hey, that was pretty good except for this part. Sometimes I almost get it right when I just draw like that. But you get the idea. It kind of comes around with this cutoff piece of energy in the mid and upper levels, and then the ridge out here over the Atlantic. This isn't going anywhere. It's like holding strong, so the alleyway is right through here. But it matters. Where is that exact alleyway? We don't know. Now, let's look at the euro. The euro is still different overall. So here it is. We only get 24-hour increments from this particular site. The work there that Levi Cowan has done for many years, making this publicly available. So here's 24 hours out, and not quite as robust looking as the GFS. And the euro does clip the Yucatan more directly, it looks like. Why? I'll tell you. From what I'm seeing, the European is suggesting a weaker overall system. It never aligns. It never gets larger into the atmosphere to kind of feel that pressure tendency of the larger weather patterns to come more north sooner. The euro does not show that. It is a weaker system, and so it's more shallow going through in the more lower levels. It's influenced more by the lower level ridging than the deep layer steering flow is the easiest way to put it. So let's keep on going. That's 48 and then 72. I mean, it's headed for, close to Texas. And then it makes landfall, presumably, and it just races up into the deep south. I mean, that is, so there's 72 hours on the euro, 72 hours on the GFS. Wow. I mean, look at the difference. Not only in the track, that's the euro, that's the GFS. The intensity of zeta in the GFS is much stronger. Probably a Category 1 hurricane in the modeling here, I would guess. And in this, it's barely a tropical storm. So, ladies and gentlemen, the duel is back. And it doesn't do us any favors. It's kind of interesting to watch, but it's very frustrating because people are trying to plan on what to do. People in Louisiana are worried about it, and they have a right to be. And then everybody east of there. It's not like what doesn't happen in Louisiana is great for everybody else, because it's kind of comes down to one important thing. The stronger zeta is, the more east I think that it will track. That's what makes sense to me. And so a stronger system being farther to the east means that somebody perhaps like Gulfport, Biloxi, Dauphin Island, Mobile, Gulf Shores, Pensacola, I don't know, somewhere in that area would have a stronger system. Maybe a weakening hurricane, kind of like Nate as an example 3 years ago. Remember Hurricane Nate? It's on our Tracking the Hurricanes 2017 on Amazon Prime and on YouTube. Just search for that. It's free. It's crowdfunded. It's available to everybody. It's our Netflix, if you will. But dead serious. Tracking the Hurricanes 2017. Look at the Nate part. It's the very end. It was the last system that year. I think this will give you a good idea of what we could expect if it is stronger and comes more east with time, kind of like the GFS was showing. So this is the euro. Interesting. It's very weak compared to the GFS. Now, let's look at the GFS parallel. And again, the best way to describe this is the new model of the GFS. I mean, literally and figuratively. You know how, again, you have like a 2018 car, and then you got the 2021 model that's coming out, and you can see it in commercials and in the showroom, but you haven't gone and bought it yet. You haven't bought it yet. But you know it's there. That's kind of like the GFS parallel. It's the new version of the GFS running in parallel to kind of see if there's anything that needs to be tweaked or whatever. That's the best way I can describe it. It's not operational yet, but it's not, Bob's model. Sorry, Bob. Any Bob. You know what I mean? It's not some random BS model that's being run in some, whatever. You know what I mean? It's because you got to be careful, because some people like to cherry pick to fit their agenda of hyping something up. And I do not like to do that. There's no reason to. But it is interesting because this will eventually be the GFS. Okay? And so when it shows certain things, you have to sometimes wonder, does it see something? Is it sensing something? Whatever. So let's move this out. Again, initial position, probably a little bit more north and east than reality, but we'll see. 24 hours, which will be valid at 6Z, so about 2 a.m. Sorry, there's 24 hours. It'd be 8 o'clock. It's actually interesting. The GFS parallel, and we can just look at how these work. This is why it's so neat to be able to do this. So there's the operational. There's the parallel. The operational is actually a little bit more organized, if you want to be honest about it. And who doesn't, right? So let's move on. 36 hours. GFS parallel looks like a little Mickey Mouse down there. It does, right? See? Literally, it's a hidden Mickey. Isn't that cute? Maybe that means something. We'll see. I hope not. Looking for signs in the models like a Rorschach test. So the parallel goes on out to 48, clips the Yucatan with no landfall, though, just kind of brushes by. So 48 hours out, north of the Yucatan, the operational GFS, very similar now. They're both similar. So this gives me reason to think that maybe the parallel has a good handle on this. Moving on out into time further, now this is where they start to diverge a little bit. That is a healthy hurricane in the parallel, no doubt about it. And if we go and sneak down here and look at the sea level pressure, global models are not known for nailing that, but it shows 970 approaching landfall, 965, 968 going back in time, and it makes landfall there, as we know, kind of at an angle there, southwest to northeast, kind of where Sally came in. And definitely in the parallel, that would be a hurricane, and a fairly solid hurricane at that. What about the operational? We can do the same thing. Not quite as robust as the parallel, but nevertheless, a hurricane, 983, yep, sure. And then it makes landfall, weakening, kind of like I said with Nate, how Nate did in 2017. And then it all moves up into the southeast as that upper level energy comes out. Just a big rainmaker, which is good in one sense because some of these areas are getting towards drought. But that's a whole other issue. We're going to have to deal with this, with flooding and whatnot, and I'll talk about that more tomorrow and on Tuesday. Now, for the ensembles. You ready for just more like, ugh, really? But this is actually very helpful. This is the 12Z. That's the 12 part. 25th is today. And you know the year, of course, right? And it's October, right? Just making sure we're all on the same page. This is the 12Z run. And this is the European ensemble, courtesy of weathernerds.org. And what do you notice? I hope you understand this. If you don't, I'm going to explain it to you. But does it jump out? It should. Look at the wind field. That's basically what we're, not the wind field, but this is the wind speed down here. This is the color bar. The legend. A thematic map has legends, and the legend here explains what we're looking at. Very few of the ensemble members are of the yellow, orange, red, pink, purple, whatever variety. See? Hardly any of them. Maybe a few in the yellows there. What does that tell us? That tells us that the ensemble, pretty much all of the European ensembles are weak with Zeta. And that's why it's much farther to the west than the GFS. So I think we've got it. All this that I'm going on, I know I can talk a long time on these updates, but this is how I look at it. And I think it's incredible that we can kind of figure this out together, or at least think we have. So I think we've boiled it down. There's two scenarios. It's going to be weak, never get its act together to speak of, much farther to the west, comes in Louisiana, rainmaker, yes, a little bit more of a stress, for everybody that's dealt with Laura and Delta, I get it, but more west means weaker. It would be much closer. Why would it be weaker? It would be closer to that energy that is ejecting out of the Rockies. The shear would be stronger over here, and that would help to keep it very weak. If it's stronger, it's going to go more to the east, as we have seen, and I'll just show you on the GFS version of this. So stronger equals more east, and we're going to see that reflected nicely in the GFS ensembles here. And those colors are much more in the yellows, oranges, and reds. So there you go. I think we know the key to this whole thing. Stronger, more east, weaker, more west, less impacts, obviously. And if it's stronger and more east, probably more impacts. So what does Mark think is going to happen? I couldn't tell you. I'm not going to go there because I don't know. I think there's enough evidence to maybe lean in the direction of stronger, but we'll just have to see. There's this is just tough. I don't know. So the best thing we can do is just kind of watch it together and be ready for it, okay? It is late enough in the season that at least we are very confident that we don't have to worry about a major impact. But you can still get 5, 6, 7, 8 feet of surge. You can get some wind damage. Think about Sally, and this could be somewhere on the order of Sally, maybe. Small chance of that. More, like I said, I would think it would be more like Nate in 2017. But we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. That's why I'm here, is to try to figure out everything along with you. All right? As it says, monitoring Zeta. We're monitoring it, see what's happening. So I will be leaving North Carolina tomorrow and heading down to the Gulf Coast again. Gulfport, Mississippi will be the first destination, and we'll see what happens from there. All along the way, I'll be able to update things. I will do a morning update fairly early in the morning, probably 8:30, 9 a.m. Eastern, and then I got to finish packing up the truck and get out of here and get on down there and be ready. For the sake of everybody in Louisiana, and you know what I mean by this, I hope I don't see you. And people say that to me all the time. Man, I hope I don't see you, at least when you're working. We get it. We get it. And for my friends in Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida, well, it just goes with the territory. We will deal with it the best we can. All right, that's it. As always, thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time and attention. Remember, I'm on Twitter at Hurricane Track. We are also crowd-funded. That's how we're able to do this. Patreon.com/Hurricane Track. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like the video, share the video, whatever. Help make it popular, make it grow, so that we can continue to do great things. That's all I ask. Have a great rest of your Sunday, and stay safe, too. I am Mark Sudduth, HurricaneTrack.com. I'll see you again tomorrow.